The Formed Book Club. Catholic book lovers unpacking good books, chapter by chapter.
We're back. The Formed Book Club. Continue to discuss Science of the Doorstep of God by Father Spitzer. And last session, we covered 2 pages. And there's about 260, since we're doing math here, there's 260 pages in the book. And that would be 130 sessions, 130 weeks. Well, we can do that in 2.5 years. We'll make it through. Hang on, everybody. So we're on page 61. We're talking about the fine-tuning. Does it point to intelligence? Fine-tuning being the actual factual quantities of certain constants, in the universe. Had they been different, we wouldn't be here. Let's go ahead on page 63, unless there's something before that.
Well, I actually have 62. If you
Go
can,
ahead.
You're rushing ahead there, Father. You're rushing
I know.
ahead.
I jumped over a page.
Well, something that I found encouraging and interesting, intriguing, is Stephen Hawking's journey. We read a couple of weeks back about his bad logic in basically presuming a godless explanation, but now we see here towards the bottom, page 62, Stephen Hawking and Thomas Hertog's 2018 discovery that a universe cannot be generated from the infinite fractal multiverse. Hawking and Hertog's analysis shows that any multiverse generating our universe would have to be finite, not only in past time, that is, have a beginning, but also in the number of its bubble universes. As Hawking noted, we are not down to a single unique universe, but our findings imply a significant reduction of the multiverse to a much smaller range of possible universes. So the fact that Stephen Hawking, towards the end of his life, is basically coming to an understanding that there has to be a beginning and there has to be a limit, that we don't live in an infinite multiverse.
63 here, new paragraph. A second example of fine-tuning for life in our universe is the very slight positive value of the cosmological constant. The cosmological constant is the value of the energy density of the vacuum of space. But what he says here is that, and you mentioned this at the beginning of the last session, Joseph, that in a certain sense, the cosmological constant is the number which tells you how fast the universe is accelerating. And if that number were too high, we'd be blowing ourselves apart, like an explosion. Nothing would happen. Everything would be too widely dispersed. It was a little bit too low, we would never get going. We would collapse. We'd have a negative acceleration and we would collapse. So that the fact that we are accelerating at just the rate that makes it possible for the stars to form and for the heavy elements to form and for planets to form and so on, is the fine-tuning he's talking about. The third example, page 64. A third example of fine-tuning for life in our universe, initial conditions, is the critical density of mass energy immediately after the Big Bang. And I'm not sure if this is actually a different example or if it's the same example looked at from a different point of view, because it's like if you consider the universe as a ball you squeeze, and you squeeze it tightly enough and you let it go, it expands, right? If you don't squeeze it tightly enough, it won't expand very much. So it seems like the density of the universe at the beginning is another way of expressing the cosmological constant, because that density is like a spring. If you don't push it down far enough, it's not going to spring anywhere. Push it down too far, it'll jump off the table. So you got to push it down just far enough so that it goes up and doesn't leave the table. But so that energy density is what you need to get the spring at the right point. To me, it's the same thing as the cosmological constant. It's that point at which, if you let it go, it won't jump too far and it won't not jump at all. But I could be wrong on that.
Father, could I indulge myself with another metaphorical example? Because these are the ones that make it visualize it for me.
Okay.
So two-thirds of the debate down, page 65, the different visual image. Here's an illustration. Imagine you have a grid that is 10 trillion square centimeters, about the length and width, a two-dimensional cross-section of our Milky Way galaxy. This immense volume of 1 trillion centimeters by 1 trillion centimeters represents the available parameter space of really possible values of the density of mass energy 1 nanosecond after the Big Bang. Imagine further there is only 1 square centimeter in the midst of that huge volume that represents the critical density of mass energy allowing the development of life in the universe. This tells you how exceedingly improbable and fine-tuned our life-permitting universe really is, quite beyond any one-off random occurrence. So the same sort of thing. Before it was that linear, loads of zeros, but now you've got a grid, 1 centimeter grid. It's the size of the Milky Way now, the whole galaxy, and only one of those square centimeters is what's necessary to have what we have now.
That's right. And again, when people become, it's part of the enlightenment here of reason kind of divorced from kind of intuition that, well, then it's possible, isn't it? I mean, maybe only 1 square centimeter of the galaxy, but it could have been that one. And if you have infinite time and infinite matter, of course, you're gonna reach that point at some point, some time. But it becomes there's so many other pointers to the existence of God that to take these one by one as a mathematician, well, that could have happened and this could have happened, even though the odds are so phenomenally small, we can still explain it that way. Well, it gets a little tiresome after a while.
Especially when you put them all together and find out that every single one of these things is this crazy improbability. It'd be one thing if we talk about just one thing.
This 1 square centimeter in the midst of the Milky Way galaxy is only what makes life possible.
Yeah.
It doesn't explain how a bacterium comes into being and how other things come into being. This is just a pure basic.
Right.
I mean, honestly, I can't judge other people's minds from the inside, and their sincerity and so on. But this goes back to the idea of wonder, Vivian. To me, it borders on blasphemy to be making all these mathematical calculations. Well, this could have happened this way, I mean, are you blind?
Right. But
I don't know. I mean, I have faith, and it's been clear to me from almost my childhood that there has to be an origin, there has to be a cause. Everything else has a cause. Yeah. And that's the other thing is they leave out being. You're presupposing we have all these material particles. Well, how do they exist? What about the fact that they exist?
Mm-hmm.
How do you explain that?
Because nothing comes from nothing.
Nothing comes from nothing.
Literally 1 speck of dust should be enough.
But then they'll say, well, it's always been there. It's always been there.
Well,
right?
that's why that's where Father Spitzer began
with entropy.
With we have to tackle this argument. It's always been there.
Yeah.
And so that's where he starts.
Yeah, it had to have a beginning.
Yeah.
Well, and he often will say, well, it's very, very likely to have a beginning. But the point is, if entropy, that law is a valid law of nature, and there's been no exceptions to it that we found, then the universe, which is finite, we know that. How? That's another question. We know that. It cannot have been going for an infinitely long time because we would have run down by now. We've gone through that before. Okay, I'm repeating myself. This is fine-tuning for the initial conditions. Now comes B, fine-tuning for life and the 4 universal forces. And let me say something about forces. there's four of them. They reduce everything else too. Electromagnetic, within the nucleus of the atom, the strong nuclear force, which holds the protons together, the weak nuclear force, which governs the radiation, and gravity. And they're trying to develop a theory which relates all four forces, but they haven't got it yet. That's the so-called TOE, theory of everything. But what does that mean to say the strong nuclear force? Here's what it means. It means we know there's particles called protons that have a positive charge. What's that, a positive charge? Well, what we know is that they naturally repel each other. That's all we really know. And so if they repel each other, well, there must be something which makes them move away from each other. We'll call it a force. And we'll call that the electromagnetic force, because we're going to say the two positive charges repel. All we mean by that is that there's two things of some kind that repel. There must be something in that kind of being which makes them repel. We'll call those positive charges. But then the question is, wait a minute. If protons are positively charged, why don't they fly apart? Well, they don't fly apart. Therefore, there must be something holding them together. Let's call that the strong nuclear force. Well, they don't know what that is. No one knows what that is. All they know is that these things, well, they naturally move apart, so we call that positive charge. But they don't fall apart. There's a force holding them together. Basically, you got to realize that much as they know, they're quantifying the relationships of things which they really don't know, and they give names to, so we can talk about them, but we just don't know. Or electromagnetism, well, that's part of the positive charge type thing. I mean, why is it that protons and electrons, why do they attract each other? Well, I don't know, but why don't we call this a positive, this a negative, and we'll say that's what explains it. Not explain it, really. I mean, it
describes it. A description is not an explanation.
No, it labels it. That's all it does. We're sticking a label on things so that we can talk about them.
But on this topic, which of the four forces is most important? Well, the fact is, without any one of them, if one of them lacked, nothing would be. We wouldn't be. That's for sure. But so, gravity, of course, we'd have to tie ourselves down if it weren't for gravity. And the strong and weak nuclear forces are inside the atom, but all of the forces besides the one inside the nucleus and gravity, the other two, the only one force left, electromagnetism, that's what holds us together. Our bodies are held together by electromagnetism. That's what keeps the molecules together, the different charges, So we're all electrical. I mean, it keeps our atoms together, keeps our molecules together, it keeps our shape the way it is, keeps our skin on our head. It's all electricity. It's amazing. And by the way,
sorry, please.
We're our own battery. I mean, how is it that I can move my finger and my brain says something, my finger moves that way? Well, there's nerves, right? Now, how do they move? It's electrical current. My body chemically creates electricity, which then can send the message, into my brain. That's amazing.
Yeah. And again, my understanding is, and you would understand it better than me, Father, but that we don't know what electricity is, right? Again, same sort of thing. We just observe what it does. We don't know what it is. Yeah.
And we describe, we give names to it. We measure it. We say, well, if you spin this thing fast enough, it'll cause this thing to spin over here fast enough. Let's see. So
even the fact that these atoms then make molecules.
Yeah, that's electricity.
That's electricity. So you take oxygen, you got hydrogen, you put them together just the right way, you got water. But why does it do that? Who told those molecules to make water? I don't know. But without that, we wouldn't have water. Just think how fundamental water is. Well, it's mind-boggling. It's absolutely mind-boggling.
And here's a related thing to that. As I raise this book higher and higher, it gets lighter and lighter, which is further away from the Earth, right?
Oh, less gravity.
And if I go further up enough, it'll be outside the gravitational field. Well, not entirely outside, but it'll weigh almost nothing. But I asked myself, well, how does this book know how far it is from the center of the earth? How does it know that? How does it know how much to weigh? You know, I mean, because it's going to weigh less and less. I raise it up, but well, then the answer is there's space is curved, and the curvature of space is relative to the distance it is from a massive body, and therefore it's the curvature of space, which gives us the weight of things with the gravitational pull. But how does space know when to curve? How does space know that I'm a mile above the Earth and not 50 feet, and therefore I got to curve more or curve less? I mean, the fact that things are connected that don't touch each other. Well, maybe there's gravitons. Maybe there's particles going back and forth. Okay, well let's look into that. But I mean, it is a sad thing when a scientist loses a sense of wonder, because just like Chesterton could wonder at anything, the string in his pocket, a piece of cheese, whatever, a torn page in his book. I mean, everything is wonderful. But these things that scientists are wonderful in a much more complex way, because you can understand the childlike innocence of Chesterton, who is in awe of a blade of grass. Okay. But how much more in awe should we be with a microscope as we see photosynthesis, what causes that in there, all these other complex, the cell, like you say. I'm sorry, I'm getting homiletic and enthusiastic. Let's move on. Conclusion.
Yeah, Father, maybe page 69, you talk about the theory of everything. And again, we have that final paragraph there, not the quote, but above it. Even if a theory of everything were to be discovered, it would show only why the constants in our laws of nature are mathematically determined toward life. If it would not answer the further question of why our laws of nature are mathematically determinable toward life in the first place.
Right.
Why is it that our universe has physical laws that are determinable toward life when they are not logically necessary? That is, when there are other logically consistent sets of natural laws that are not life-permitting and cannot become life-permitting. This problem was set out by Carr and Rees as follows. Even if all apparently anthropic coincidences could be explained in this way by a complete physical theory of everything, it would still be remarkable that the relationships dictated by physical theory happened also to be those propitious for life. So even if we discover this missing link, this theory of everything, it doesn't answer the questions.
No.
Well, yeah, and where do laws come from? I mean, we say that this now obeys the law of gravity, but where is the law of gravity? Well, we say there's a law because it operates in a certain way and we quantify it. But where can a law exist except in a mind?
Well, and look at this astonishing claim that Father Spitzer makes on the top of page 70, that second paragraph. In light of the above, most physicists have shifted their focus from an intra-universal cause of fine-tuning to a trans-universal cause. Most physicists. It sounds as though they've sort of exhausted all of the, trying to figure this out from inside, and now are willing to consider there must be something outside of the universe.
Let's go back to page 68 at the bottom, because he mentions there when they realize this fine-tuning takes place and these cosmological constants, etc., physicists have suggested 3 areas of possible causation. So what causes it? There must be a cause. What are the possibilities? All of which merit our consideration. 1, an unknown fundamental cause within our universe. So cause within. 2, a material cause beyond our observable universe. And 3, a transmitted cause, a transphysical intelligence. And so the good thing about Spitzer is he's going to go through things one at a time. And you just went through the first one there, that this is just, everybody said, well, we can't explain
from within.
From within, So what is it from without? And that's going to be the next section. Cyclic cosmologies, inflationary cosmologies, and the multiverse. Those are the 3 ways of explaining how these constants could be the way they are, and what caused them. Basically, he's going to go through all three and show that none of them work.
Yeah, most of them are not so much explaining as efforts to explain away. If you you're going to have this problem, how did the universe begin? And if you won't accept the fact there had to be a beginning, then you have to come up with all sorts of ways of explaining away the beginning. And that's what these really are. These are fruits of the imagination trying to explain away the obvious.
Yes, but to give them their due, though, when you're looking for causes, you want to look at all the possible ones and see if you can eliminate some to get the real one. That's how science works. And this first idea of the cyclic universe, that's the idea of the universe expanding and contracting. It's like a bouncing ball, But if a ball is bouncing, you leave it bounce and bounce and bounce, it will eventually stop bouncing. That's entropy. And so you can't explain the universe having come to this extraordinary precision by the fact that it's been bouncing forever, because it can't bounce forever. He says that on page 71, it's sort of the same idea, new paragraph there. The universe must use up large amounts of order needed for change to expand and contract. Therefore, every time the universe expands and contracts, it increases entropy, or it's lower and lower and lower until it finally doesn't bounce anymore. Can inflationary cosmology explain the entropy of the Big Bang? And so this is a complex, scientific theory, which they do believe that for some reason the universe has expanded, really expanded fast and then slowed down, not in a linear way, So it didn't expand fast, but it the bang took place, and there was a sudden expansion, inflation they call it, and then it slowed down. That's one of the ways they try to explain the way things are now, and project back into the way it was at the beginning. But his response to that from other scientists is that the fine-tuning required for this to happen is even more statistically improbable by many orders of magnitude than what we need to explain the universe we have. So we're going to try to explain something very complex by something even more complex. That doesn't work. That's
Yeah, just a quote there on that's just the buttress that Sean Carroll, who I presume is another physicist, top of page 72, just says exactly what you said, but we're quoting authority. The initial conditions necessary for getting inflation to start are extremely fine-tuned, more so than those of the conventional Big Bang model was meant to help fix. So that we just said that the effort to explain away the Big Bang necessitates something even more complex and unlikely than the Big Bang itself, and more fine-tuning in consequence.
So, conclusion now, part 4. Can a multiverse explain fine-tuning for life? And this goes into the eternal inflation and infinite multiverses and so on. And what he concludes, page 73, 1, 2, 3 there at the bottom. There's any multiverses. Many universes which are either like ours, but just unobservable, or of a different order. He says,
page 75.
Page 75, yeah. Non-scientific character, untestable and non-predictive. So it's a pure speculation which you can't test. 2, significant divergences from observational experimental data, which is he's going to cover that. And 3, the irresolvable problem of Boltzmann brain and brief brain domination. Well, yeah, that's a problem which I don't think is even a possibility. But I want to say one thing about this. At the bottom of page 75, he asks the question, why is the infinite universe unscientific? First of all, hypothetical bubble universes, except ours, and the multiverse itself are, in principle, unobservable because they're beyond our event horizon, something we can see. Therefore, it's highly unlikely that they will be able to qualify as a scientific explanation. As may by now be clear, all scientific explanations must be grounded in observable data, but the multiverse cannot be so valid. However, excuse me, we have to refer to what he calls this abduction, right? Or abductive reasoning. Just like we couldn't see Pluto before we knew it had to be there, there is a way you could say there must be multiverses, because without them, we wouldn't have what we are now. But the flaw there is that it's not true that we come to that conclusion. We cannot say that from our universe now, there have to be multiverses. Whereas with Pluto, we said there has to be some body there that exerting gravitational force. So I took a slight disagreement with what he says here.
Well, I mean, the point is that the Pluto, you're using abductive reasoning, but you're using abductive reasoning based upon observable data.
Right.
Whereas, just to say, well, there have to be other infinite number of other universes. That's not from observable data. That's a hypothesis based upon. I mean, it's the same sort of hypothesis that a science fiction author would use to come up with an interesting story. It's imagination.
Well, yeah, and it could be that the universe is resting on a big turtle. Well, what are the turtles? Oh, the turtle's all the way down. They say. You know what? I'm sorry. That you can present that as a possible cause of the universe stability, let's say, but it's not a necessary cause for the universe to be the way it is. There's other explanations, and you've got no way of proving or disproving your explanation, unless you find the big turtle. But so,
and again, just at the bottom of page 76, there we don't have to bottom of 76, top 77. We don't have to list them all, but he gives a long list of some of the the greatest scientists of the last 40 or so years that have basically come to the conclusion that the multiverse is not a feasible explanation for reality.
Yeah.
Including Stephen Hawking.
Including Stephen Hawking, yes.
So, well, I want to say something about page 78 here. Just at the bottom of the top paragraph, blah, 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 the general theory of relativity and its separation from quantum physics, as well as its remarkably smooth and globally finite large-scale structure, which is not generated by an infinite fractal mosaic. I didn't even look it up. I know what fractals are, but this kind of speculation wearies me, But anyway, we're told that it can't be that.
And again, on a purely scientific level, page 79, below that indented quote, Hawking, Hertog, and Banks give probative evidence that the infinite multiverse and eternal inflation are in conflict with observational and experimental data. In other words, put it bluntly, they're unscientific.
So we can rule that out. Then the irresolvable problem of the Boltzmann brain and the brief brain domination.
I mean, you spoke about that somewhat last week.
We discussed that, yeah.
Yeah, it is a single brain in a void that comes into existence through a spontaneous thermal fluctuation, fully loaded with memories of itself, existing in a universe like ours. Now that sounds like a science fiction story.
And a not very believable one either. But it's on the basis that, if you're going to start believing that a cosmos come into being because a chimpanzee can type Macbeth at a first go without even trying, then why not the fact that a brain can sort of spontaneously combust itself into being? I mean, once you're going to be that far fetched, anything's possible.
Yeah, I mean, if you can believe that, why can't you believe in God? Because God is a much more direct cause and is also pointed to by all these other types of experiences we have. Like free will and like love, All right. So I am...
It's interesting how, and I don't fully understand it, but on page 82, Father Spitzer makes the claim in the bottom of the second paragraph, the first full paragraph, the last line. Hence, in an infinite multiverse, we are also far more likely to be brief brains than the carbon-based organisms we conceive ourselves to be. So not only through these mathematical formulations of hypothetical realities are people, scientists, inventing the possibilities of these self-generating brains, but by that same calculations, now we cease to exist. I mean, it's just sort of odd that.
Well, there is an irony here, because basically physics ends up converging with the most bizarre form of skeptical metaphysics. That there's nothing but mind. They call it a brain, whereas Schopenhauer called it a mind. But basically, they really come to the conclusion that nothing exists.
And yet they're trying to demonstrate what does exist and end up annihilating their own existence. I mean, this truly is the realm of, I don't know. I don't even know. I mean, how? Just don't even know what to do with it.
I'm going to sum up with this session.
It must be this spontaneously combusted brain that imagines the rest of the cosmos into being. I mean, that's effectively what you're saying.
What this shows is that science, which is a form of knowledge, which we investigate the world around us, shows us more and more phenomenal, awesome, wonderful things we didn't know before. And also, science is able to show that its other explanations for these things are not scientific and are not verifiable and are not objective. So it's a great service real science does for us. We thank Father Spitzer for it, and we'll see you next session. God bless you all.
If you enjoyed this discussion, please help spread the word about the Forum Book Club by subscribing to the podcast and writing a review. You can sign up for weekly updates at forumedbookclub.ignatius.com.